Is there any significance of the inaudible parts of it, insofar as you're concerned, that may impact upon what you consider a truthful reflection of the interview?
For somebody, Chairperson, for somebody who was not at the meeting, they may not understand what is contained in a particular sentence, but for me, because I did the interview, I know what it sought to include.
Yeah. As far as we're concerned, there's no moment about the inaudible part of it. If our learned friends chooses to seek any accurate, complete reflection of it, then they must go and seek the audio version of it. But I don't think that for your part it's necessary to go that length.
Okay.
Mr. Maseko, the next is the affidavit.
I'm sorry, Mr. Malega. I take it that what you mean, Mr. Maseko, includes that because you were part of the interview, even where the transcript might say inaudible, you are able to remember what was said.
Yes, Chairperson, I remember what was said.
Okay, thank you.
Chairperson, I had to clear that issue so that if our learned friends are going to be afforded the privilege of cross-examination, they must know the attitude of Mr. Maseko, that nothing arises and nothing is of moment from the inaudible part of the transcript.
No, I understand, yes. Thank you.
At least they are forewarned, Chair. The next is the affidavit which begins at page 9.
I got it, Chairperson.
And as far as I can pick it up, it ends at page 19.
Yes, it does.
Right. Mr. Maseko, we will get to the details of this affidavit, but can I ask you to tell us when you made it?
Chairperson, I happen to be one of those people who play a game called Twitter, and in my timeline I got what is called a DM. For your benefit, Chairperson, this is direct message.
Well, I need that explanation. Yes.
I was going through my Twitter messages and I got a message, a direct message from a person who identified themselves as Captain Govender, who requested me to call him as a matter of urgency because I think he said the Hawks were doing an investigation in which he thought I could be of assistance to them. He left his mobile number on the direct message. I returned his call. He then informed me that they were doing an investigation on state capture. They'd read some of the statements I'd made in the media, and they would like to interview me. I agreed, had a meeting with him, and he then asked me to prepare an affidavit that will actually contain all the statements that I'd made in the media, but also to share my experiences with the Gupta family. So that affidavit is a product of my discussion with Captain Govender.
With Captain Govender?
Yes.
Did you appreciate at the time you made it that this affidavit may be used for some other purpose other than the one for which you intended?
He had made it very clear to me that the Hawks were conducting an investigation on state capture, and they wanted an affidavit from me. So I understood that ultimately it was going to be part of some legal process. At that stage, there was not a decision to set up a commission on state capture, but I knew that it was going to end up in some legal process, yes.
So that as far as you're concerned, this was an affidavit prepared for the Hawks?
That's the impression I had, yes.
Then can I ask you to confirm the date of that affidavit on page 18?
affidavit was signed on the 22nd June 2017. Sworn in and signed by the Commissioner of Oaths, who was Captain Ferguson Govender.
Yes. Again, we'll come back to the details of that affidavit. And then the next in sequence is the affidavit, which begins at page 6. Are you there at page 6 of Exhibit E1?
I got it,
Yes.
Chairperson.
It runs up to page 8.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you to start, first of all, with page 8? I would like to authenticate your signature. Is that your signature?
That is indeed my signature, Chairperson.
And when did you execute this affidavit?
It was on the 24th of August 2017.
And where were you at the time?
This was done at my offices in Sandton.
Yes. And you will see that the Commissioner of Oaths is someone who by now must have been familiar to you.
Yes, it was Captain Govender.
The same captain who took the first affidavit.
Yes, it is, Chairperson.
Can you explain to the chairperson why did it become necessary for Captain Govender to come to you second time around to seek another affidavit?
Chairperson, Captain Govender called me to say that he had had discussions with his colleagues, and they felt that there was some additional information they required regarding the details of my experiences with the Gupta family. So it was necessary for me to depose of the second affidavit, which just confirms a lot of the details that they felt were not included in the initial affidavit.
And that is a detail that you provide, and chairperson will go through the detail later on, and from paragraph 1 up to paragraph 8 of that affidavit. We will get to that detail later on, Mr. Maseko. We are now at the stage where we have completed the sequencing of your document. We are now at the stage where you have made disclosures to investigative bodies such as the Public Protector, to the Hawks via Captain Govender. We are now at the stage where you have made media statements about complaints relating to what you conceived and considered to be irregularities and illegalities. You have almost brought to the attention of the country all of these things. Question that I'd like you to deal with is this. Insofar as law enforcement agents such as the Hawks are concerned, have you been told by anyone on their behalf about the state of the investigation with reference to the contents of the allegations made, to the affidavits given to them?
Chairperson, around April 2018, I got a call from the Hawks requesting a meeting with me to take the matter forward. They informed me that the matter had now been handed over from Captain Govender to a new team of investigators who are now preparing to take the matter to court. And what they told me was that they were looking at possibly charging Mr. Ajay Gupta and President Zuma. And they wanted to just go through the affidavit, the two affidavits again, in preparation of that matter. So the meeting did take place. I can confirm the date. It's probably in my diary. So I was given the impression that they were actually getting ready to proceed with the case. If I may just add one little detail, Chairperson. Subsequent to the raid of the Saxon World compound, in some of the media statements, I did read that one of the matters that the Hawks said they were investigating was my complaint, the issue that I'd raised in my affidavit. But a few weeks after that exchange, they then came back to me to inform me that my matter was no longer going to be followed through. So as I'm sitting here, I'm under the impression that in fact that matter has been, I think the words they used was that the matter has been put in abeyance or something, but it's no longer happening. I should relax.
Mr. Maseko, I think it's important that you should look at your diary and come back to us with the date. You don't have to do it now, but that's installment number 2.
We'll do so, Chairperson.
Thank you. In the documents that you have given us, your next interface with the Hawks arises from a media publication, more specifically the Sunday Times. It is in Exhibit E1, and I would ask you to go to page 102.
Okay, I found it, Chairperson.
And remember, in context, as far as you're concerned, the matter is in abeyance. Then come this Sunday Times publication. Can I confirm this with you, that you have read it, correct?
Pardon?
Have you read this Sunday Times?
Yes, I've read this.
Yes.
That's okay.
In the interest of time, can I ask you to sum up what it says for us?
Chairperson, with due respect, I just need to clarify that there are 2 matters with the Hawks.
Yes.
The matters that you were raising a few minutes ago was with regard to the Hawks doing an investigation with a view to laying charges against Ajay Gupta and the President.
Yes.
Regarding the GCIS matter.
Yes.
The article in page 102 refers to a subsequent interaction with the Hawks, which is on a different matter.
And I'd like you to explain to the judge what that different matter is.
Okay, the subsequent interaction with the Hawks, Chairperson, was as I was in conversation with the Hawks about their investigation of the GCIS matter with the Guptas, I then got contacted by somebody else from the Hawks who said they wanted a meeting with me to discuss some matter that has to do with public works. And I agreed to a meeting, and I had a meeting with the captains who were investigating the matter. On my arrival at the venue for the meeting, I was asked if I had brought my lawyer with to the meeting.
Who was your lawyer at the time?
Well, for that matter, I didn't have a lawyer.
Okay.
I did not have a lawyer because I didn't know what the issue was about. So on my arrival, I was asked if I had a lawyer. I expressed surprise because I was just responding to your request for a meeting. In my view, it was a first meeting to discuss whatever they wanted to discuss. It transpired at that first meeting that, in fact, they were investigating. It was a different team altogether, which had nothing to do with the first matter that I was raising. They wanted to discuss a procurement of an IT system that took place during my tenure as the Director General in the Department of Public Works. The procurement took place around 2005, I believe. So they were investigating that matter particularly my role in the awarding of that particular contract. So they wanted to know if I was prepared to do the interview with them in the absence of an attorney. I said, look, let's have a discussion, ask me whatever questions you want. But they then asked me if I wanted to do the interview and then sign a statement during the course of the meeting. But they also made me aware that I have an option not to sign any statement, to procure the services of an attorney, and then prepare a short statement that I'll submit to them. I declined the invitation to sign. I opted to consult an attorney, and Mr. Maseko here is my attorney. We then set up a follow-up meeting with them to discuss the very same matter, to do the interview, because my point was essentially that this is an incident that took place in 2005. I was aware that the matter was investigated, but I was also aware that the matter had been concluded. But they insisted that we prepare a statement because they were having a meeting with a prosecutor the very next week or within 10 days. And we were required to
Maseko, I'm
prepare.
sorry to interrupt you, and my apologies to be rude. Okay. You talked about Mr. Maseko being your attorney, and you are Mr. Maseko. So anyone who reads the record might well be confused.
Oh,
Can I ask you to give us the full details of your attorney, who is Mr. Maseko? And if there's any relations between the two of you, you might well have to explain that to us.
okay. My attorney is Tyrone Maseko.
Tyrone. Yes.
Maseko is the young man sitting in front here.
Yes. Any relations?
Chairperson, all Masekos are related.
Well, Mr. Maseko, I can just say that I always think all the Zondos belong together. But I guess counsel wants on a serious note.
Yes, and just to make sure that when I read the record next time around, I don't confuse you being
Oh,
attorney.
okay. He's Tyrone Maseko, no blood relation.
Thank you. I'm sorry, can you then proceed from where I had interrupted
okay.
you?
So at the end of that meeting, my attorney and I agreed that we'll prepare a short statement that we'll submit to them. And we made it very clear to them that because of lack of access to documentation about that particular tender, we will just prepare a preliminary statement that we'll just give to them because they needed to make a presentation to the prosecutor. And the promise they made was that they will come back to us within a week of us submitting such a document. To date, we've not received any response from that office. We have written at least 2 letters to find out what is the status of that particular investigation. Yes. To date, we have not received any
I'd like to take you quickly through those documents. And Chair, they have been put in the bundle, but they're out of sequence. So with your permission, can I just deal with them in order to show some sequence?
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Maseko, you have dealt with the article at page 102. And the sum total of that article is a suspicion that you had been involved in the award of an IT contract in circumstances which may have been irregular. And then you were asked to make a statement. And I would like to start with a document which is an email dated 8 June 2018, and that email is on page 92.
I got it.
That email is addressed to Captain Masilela.
That
And
is correct, yes.
it appears to come from Mr. Tyrone Maseko, who we know now is your attorney.
That's correct.
And And I take it that you are aware of this email,
Yes, I'm aware, Chairperson.
and in it, your attorney says, I refer to the above matter in keeping with our undertaking to you following our meeting on Wednesday. Please find attached my client's statement in respect of case number 486/02/2017. We trust that this will be of assistance to your investigation. You see that?
Yes, I've got it.
Who is Captain Maseko? Masilela. Masilela.
Okay. Captain Masilela is the captain from the Hawks who approached me regarding this particular matter.
The email references the meeting of Wednesday. Was he part and parcel of that meeting?
That's the gentleman we met, yes.
Good. And then the statement follows from page 93.
I got it.
It ends up at page 96. Is that the statement which was attached to Mr. Maseko, your attorney's email?
Chairperson, it ends on page 97.
97.
Yeah, that is the statement, correct.
All right. And you signed it on page 90,
I signed it on page 97.
97.
Yeah.
All right. And then thereafter follows an email which is on page 99. I skipped the one on page, well, let me deal with the one on page 98 first. It is dated 26 June 2018. Do you see that?
I see it, Chairperson.
And it is addressed to someone called Masilela Daniel at sap.gov.za. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that, Chairperson.
Are you able to identify whose email is that?
Masilela is still the captain from the Hawks that we had a meeting with.
And it references the same case number.
Yes.
You see that?
I see that.
Dear sir, kindly find the attached letter for your attention. Do you see that?
I see that, yes.
And is that attachment the letter which begins at page 99?
That is correct, yes.
I'm going to deal with some few issues relating to the contents of that letter. Paragraph 1 references the meeting of 6 June. See that?
That's correct.
And then paragraph 2 repeats the undertaking you made at the meeting that you made the statement. Correct?
That's correct.
We have seen the statement. And then paragraph 3 says the following. I'd like to read it and invite you to comment. You advised that you would revert to us during the course of last week on the National Prosecuting Authority's NPA decision on the docket. However, to date, we have not heard from you. Do you see that?
I see that, correct.
May I read paragraph 4. May I request that you please advise us of the status of the docket, i.e., what decision has been made by the NPA, if any. We look forward to hearing from you as soon as possible.
That is correct, yes.
And Ms. Maseko, you have given the statement under cover of the email of 8 June. It is now almost 18 days down the line, and you are asking for progress in terms of your attorney's letter dated 26 June 2018. Did you receive any progress report thereafter from the Hawks, especially Captain Masilela?
Chairperson, we were getting anxious because this was beginning to have a negative impact on our preparations for this particular commission. But to answer your question more directly, we had not received any correspondence at that point.
That was not the last of the follow-up your attorney made to Captain Masilela. If you turn to page 100,
I got that.
You will see a similar cast of characters that we now know by now. First is your attorney, Themba Maseko. The date is 9 July 2018. Do you see that?
I see that.
And the intended recipient is Masilela Daniel at subs.gov.za. We know who he is.
Yes.
And the reference is to the same case number. And then the body of the email says, kindly find the attached letter for your urgent attention. Do you see that?
I see that, sir.
And the attachment is on page 101.
I see that.
I've read it, you've read it. Can you just quickly sum up its contents for us?
The letter on 101.
Yes.
Basically, the letter reads as follows, Chairperson. I refer to the above matter in our letter to you dated 26 June 2018. In that letter, we indicated that our client still awaits official communication of the decision of the state as regards its intention in case number 486/217, which decision we reasonably believe ought to have been made by now, given the duration of the investigation, undertakings made to us, as well as our client's cooperation in the investigation. Kindly let us know how the state intends to proceed herein as a matter of urgency. We look forward to hearing from you. Yours faithfully, Themba Maseko.
It's now a period of a month after this follow-up by Mr. Maseko, your attorney. Has there been any response?
No response at all, Chair.
There appears to be a pattern of behavior, and we will argue that pattern later on before the judge.
Okay.
But the judge has thus far heard evidence from Mr. Jonas about the conduct and behavior of the Hawks in relation to a matter that was raised with him.
Okay.
Ms. Mentor testified about a behavior from the Hawks. You have given your evidence around the Hawks' behavior in relation to a suspicion hanging over your head. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about it?
Well, I saw it as, Chairperson, I saw it as an unwelcome distraction, and it was a complete surprise to me. At that stage, I was seized with two big legal issues. The first one was the original Hawks investigation about the Guptas and the GCIS matter. Secondly, I was seized with preparations for this commission. Both contacts with the Hawks came after the announcement that the Zondo Commission has been established. But more relevant is that both initiatives came after the Zondo Commission made its announcement that it will proceed with its work. I think the initial statement said the work was going to start in August or July, somewhere there. So this became an unwelcome distraction because it meant that instead of me spending time with my attorney preparing for today, I had to now try and get information. And the biggest issue was that this investigation pertained to a matter that took place about 13 years ago during my duration as DG of Public Works. I had no access to any documentation and information. So preparing even that initial statement that I submitted to them was largely based on memory because I did not have access to any documentation. So it was a distraction, a surprising one for that matter.
Mr. Maseko, I'm going to conclude on this issue by asking you to turn back to page 102. And you will see that the second last unnumbered paragraph on the left-hand column of that newspaper article suggests that the Sunday Times did something far more than you did, and they were able to contact the Hawks, and that there was a response supposedly, and I put it no higher than that, on behalf of the Hawks. And I'd like to read it out and ask you to comment. And Chair, accept that this is the news report, but given the nature of the inquiry before you, we would not be faced with a frontal objection of hearsay. It reads as follows, Mr. Maseko, and please bear with me if I am too slow for you. Hawks spokesman Hangwani Mulauzi said he was not aware of the case and did not know the individual who had met Maseko. I will stop there for a moment. I'm not saying that this is the true version of the Hawks, but if what is recorded here is true, what would be your response to a claim that the Hawks were not aware of this case and none on behalf of the Hawks met with you?
Chairperson, there are events that happened after the publication of this meeting, which we may talk to later. But to answer your question, I was extremely shocked and taken aback by that comment, because I was convinced that the people I met were indeed coming from the Hawks. To the extent that when we had the first meeting in Sentin, they did produce their ID cards, so I was convinced that it was with them. But secondly, and rather I should say fortunately, for the second meeting, because the first meeting I attended alone, for the second meeting, my attorney, Mr. Maseko, or Tyrone Maseko, was present with me. And the second meeting took place at the headquarters of the Hawks in Silverton, in Pretoria. There was no basis or reason for us to suspect that these two individuals we met were not from the Hawks, and the email address they gave us was, as you can tell from those annexures that you've referred to, the ID numbers looked like official ID numbers. Should I move on to events beyond or after the publication?
Yes.
Because I think they may assist your chairperson with this matter. So when the article was published, I then made contact with my attorney to just draw his attention to this article, because it was of great concern that the Hawks were saying they were not aware of the investigation. My telephone was ringing off the hook that whole Sunday, and I basically switched it off. In the evening of that Sunday of when was this thing published? 20th of, I don't know. Anyway, the publication of this article.
The publication seems to be March 2016.
22 July.
I think we need to get the date of this article.
Can you go to Exhibit E1, the index to the evidence bundle?
Yeah.
Look at item 9.
Yeah, that's the date, because
Yes. What is
the date in the copy says 2016, but the correct date is this one, the 20th of July, 2018.
22.
22 July,
Yes.
2018. So the heading at the top of that article may be misleading, because it gives the impression that the article was published in 2016. That's not correct. But anyway,
Okay. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we are all on the same page.
Yeah.
So far, I've been looking at the article on page 102 of Exhibit E1.
Yes.
Are we on the same page?
We are on the same page here. But
Okay.
the point which Mr. Maseko makes is that if you look at the top right-hand column,
Yeah.
there is a reference to the date.
Yes.
And that is not the date of the publication of the article. It's a date relating to a publication of a prior story.
Oh, okay.
And
Now I
the
understand.
date he emphasizes is the publication of the article on page 102
Yeah.
is 22 July 2018. You'll get that from page 1, the index document.
Oh,
Yes. Item 19.
okay. Maybe for my purposes, it's going to be.
So, Chair, we would ask you simply to scribe 22 July 2018 at page 102.
Thank you very much. You may continue.
May I proceed? Thank you, Chairperson. So, as I was saying, my phone rang off the hook and I switched it off. When I switched it back on late Sunday afternoon, around 6 p.m. on the 22nd, I then got a call from Mr. Mulawudzi from the Hawks, who is somebody I've worked with in government. I know very well. I can almost claim him to be a friend. We've been in the government communication space together. He was, in a sense, reprimanding me for not answering calls because he said his minister and the head of Hawks had been trying to get hold of me because they saw this story and they're extremely worried about it. He then said he was going to put me in touch with the head of the Hawks. I think it's General Libya, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, I'm going to keep my cell phone on, and the head of the Hawks can call me. We can talk. Literally a few minutes later, the general called me to ask me about this article, about whether I'd had any meetings with the Hawks, because they had checked their computer records and they could not find any proof of such an investigation taking place. He asked me where the meetings took place. The first meeting I told him took place in Sandton, happens to be some place in Sandton. The second meeting, and I told him the names of the two gentlemen who were present. I told him the second meeting took place at the offices of the Hawks in Silverton. He then asked me their names. I told him the names of the captain of the investigators. He didn't seem to recognize the names, but he said that they've checked their computer records and there's no record of such an investigation. He asked me to give him the number of those officers, and I gave him the number, and he promised to get back to me as soon as he got all the facts about the investigation. It must have been about an hour or so later that he called back to inform me that, in fact, he has confirmed that there was an investigation. Or firstly, those two people were employees of the Hawks, that they worked in a separate division in the Hawks, and that the investigation took place before his time. He was not aware of it, but he had spoken to them. They confirmed that there was such an investigation, and they told him the status of the investigation was that the matter had been submitted to the public prosecutor's office, and they're waiting for a decision. And he undertook to ensure that they give my attorney and I feedback as soon as was possible. I am sure that the feedback is on its way. I have not received it.
Thank you.
Chairperson, through your office, we will try and help to get the feedback to the extent possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Because it is unfortunate that a witness such as Mr. Maseko would have a cloud hanging over him on a matter that had happened almost 13, 15 years ago. But it's something that we would ask the investigators to pursue.
Thank you.
Mr. Maseko, we have dealt with matters of general nature that is of importance to the terms of reference that I have identified for the chairperson. We are now going to go into the specifics. It may be a laborious exercise, but such is the nature of the proceedings. I had promised that I'll come back to the CV, and that's where I'm going to start in order to source out matters of specifics and details from you. Of immediate importance in your CV relative to the proceedings of the Commission is paragraph 2.5 on page 2 of Exhibit E1. Are you at paragraph 2.5 of your CV?
Yes, I am, Chairperson.
And by the way, let me complete something about your CV, which it's important in order to place in context your current activities. In paragraph 2.2 of the same page, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
You describe yourself that as at from August 2017 to 2018, from August 2017 to July 2018, you were the Communications Director of Business Leadership SA.
That's correct, Chairperson.
There has been a public report that your contract with Business Leadership SA had come to an end.
That's correct, Chair.
When did it come to an end?
Chairperson, it was a one-year contract. It ended on the 31st of July 2018.
What are you doing since the end of that contract?
At the moment, I'm self-employed, Chairperson, trying to get involved in the business space.
All right. And I just wanted to complete that part of your CV, but I have asked you to go to paragraph 2.5.
Correct.
There you talk about your employment as the Chief Executive Officer of GCIS. You say you started in 2008 and you ended in February 2011.
That's correct.
The circumstances relating to the end of your office in GCIS is going to become a matter of importance that I'd like to explore in detail later on. Can I then ask you, insofar as your career in the public service is concerned, relating to the GCIS, to turn to page 3 and reflect on one of the functional areas you identify in the first bullet point. You say that you were managing a presidential press conference and you were managing 450 staff and 21 officers with a budget of 480 million rand. Do you see that?
Yes, I see it, Chairperson.
And the description of the budget looms large in your evidence. Now, can I ask you this? That amount of 480 million rand, what time period does it reference during your employment in the GCIS?
The budget allocation for GCIS ranged between, during my tenure at least, between 400 and 500 million rands per annum. And that number is based on allocations that we get from National Treasury.
Yes.
This is, just to be clear, Chairperson, this is just covering the GCIS's operational budget. So it does not include the other amount that we do as far as procuring services on behalf of other departments. So this is just what was in my budget.
Thank you.
Yes. In your statement, and Chairperson, I'm running ahead, I'll come back.
Yes.
In your statement, you said that Mr. A.J. Gupta mentioned to you when you met him, or in the course of a telephonic conversation, a budget of 600 million rand. Do you remember that?
That's correct, yes. I remember that.
And you said you were surprised about the fact that he knew about the budget.
Yes, I was surprised, Chairperson.
Can I ask you to square up the two amounts of the budgets that you referred? The one is 480 and the other is 600 million rand.
The 480, which ranges from year to year, is the budget allocated to GCIS as my department. That's the amount. I would have requested from National Treasury, and I will be accountable for its expenditure. So it will cover salaries of my staff, it will cover rental space, it will cover travel, offices, and some of the programs that we were running, publications, etc., as GCIS, as the department.
So that's an internal budget.
That's an internal budget.
So, Chairperson, I'm lost for description of how we can identify it for the present purposes. Can we say budget one? Is that convenient, Chair?
Well, we can say budget one. It's okay.
I don't want it to be confused with
Yeah, okay, let's call it budget one. That's fine.
budget one.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be confused with the next round of budget of 600 million that he's
Okay.
talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. My Leonard friend.
That's the 480 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
My Leonard friend, Ms. Hofmeyer, who's well known and who knows these things better than I do, he says we should call it operational budget because that's the appropriate accounting term.
I think most people will relate to operational budget.
Thank you.
Well, I had thought I was going to say Mr. Maseko should guide us as to, because he would have known what it was called.
Yes.
So,
Operational.
operational budget for
Yes.
GCIS.
GCIS chairperson.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad I failed accounting zero, Chair. Then the 600 million rand budget. Can you describe its relevance to GCIS and the connection between it and GCIS?
The chairperson, when you look at the GCIS strategic plan, it will tell you what the department plans to do for a 12-month period and the amount of money we're going to spend and what we're going to spend it on. So that's where you'll come to a figure around 400 million rands, depending on which year you're talking about. The 600 million amount that we're talking about now, pertaining to Mr. Ajay Gupta, is the money that GCIS spends on behalf of department. So this is, and just to be clear, each and every government department prepares a budget, and in their budget they have an allocation that is set aside for communication purposes. They run all kinds of communication activities as individual departments. However, individual departments then, from time to time, identify a campaign that they would like to launch nationally, and they will then design that campaign and then come to GCIS and say, we need your assistance with regard to, firstly, just making sure that the plan is aligned to our strategic plan and plans of government as a whole. There's proper alignment between departmental messages and overall government messages. Secondly, they will say we may need assistance with regard to the creative aspect of this campaign. They'll come to us with ideas about what they want to do, but they'll want input from GCIS, and obviously GCIS had built a sizable capacity in terms of skills, so we're able to assist them in that regard. Then they will say, these are the target audiences. In other words, these are the people who want to reach with this particular message. We need your assistance to guide us which are the most suitable platforms to reach communities. So GCIS will come and say, okay, if your target audience is X, your budget is Y, these are the platforms we think you should use. Take an example, they may say they want to communicate a message about how some residents or people who receive social grants in KwaZulu-Natal, the most remote parts of the country, want to communicate to those people. So we'll say, as advice, we think that you should use Ukhozi FM, local community stations, radio stations, local community newspaper, but also use Isolezwe and target a particular program on SABC 1 or 2 because of the research that we conduct from time to time. So we know how to reach audiences. So we'll then say, okay, these are the platforms you need to use. They will then say, okay, we are happy with this strategy. There will be agreement between us and the department. And then lastly, our function will then be to procure the media space. You will see in my affidavit I use the term media buying. That is essentially the point at which there's agreement about campaign, message, target audience, creative side. Then buying the advertising space in the newspapers. So we'll then agree that these are the platforms we're going to be using. We'll say this, it's going to cost you X amount of money. The departments will then transfer the money to GCIS. We'll then procure the media space on their behalf. So, and the important point to make here is that at any given point, at the start of every financial year, as CEO of GCIS, I do not have a clue about how much each department is planning to spend on advertising, because they would not have designed their campaigns at a particular point in time. So the only time we have a sense of how much we will be spending in this media buying function is when we have an aggregate of how many departments want to do which amount of procurement, media procurement would have had to do. So I would say halfway into the first quarter of the financial year, we'll then have some idea of how much we could be spending for that financial year. So that's how the system works. Council, you must stop me because I can go on forever.
No, I think,
but I think we've answered the question.
It's important that you as a witness volunteer and give information. My role is simply to guide you. And so far I think you're doing well. But to be more specific, we're dealing about the media buying function of your department.
Okay.
As I understand your evidence, you say that part and parcel of your functions as the GCIS is to buy media services from media houses on behalf of national departments.
Yes, that's correct.
And as I understand your evidence, you have outlined the processes around which you procure media services on behalf of your client departments. Now, I don't want to waste time on those processes at this stage. I will take some time to ask you to identify them later on.
Okay.
For the present purposes, that's a matter of detail that is not required from you now. The point is this: you have told the judge that you will get a picture of the total media buying budget in the first quarter of each financial year. So, factually, with reference to the approaches that were made to you by Mr. A.J. Gupta, which is around 2010, September, October 2010, we'll come back to the specific dates. By that time, you would have had an appreciation of what was the annual media buying budget for your client departments.
That's correct, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Maleka.
Yes, Chair.
Mr. Maleka has just said to you, I think you would get a picture of how much you will spend in the first quarter. But I thought earlier on you said about halfway through the year. Am I right?
No, I said halfway through the first quarter.
Oh, the first quarter.
First quarter,
okay.
yes.
No, thank you then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, to the extent that there was a budget for media buying for 2010 financial year, that would have been appreciated by you during the first quarter of 2010.
But we would have an idea, yes.
Are you able to tell the judge, to the best of your recollection, what was the budget for that financial year 2010-2011?
The budget indicated was around 600 million rands for that particular year.
That's the 2010-2011 financial year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who, from your perspective, would lawfully have knowledge of that amount?
If you ask a head of communication of any department, they wouldn't know. If you ask the minister responsible for GCIS, they wouldn't know. So it is information that would have, as a department, a figure for planning purposes. It's a figure that we would have internal within the department. So it's not a figure that we would have ordinarily went out to publish.
Thank you. Can I then take you back to page 3? Oh, by the way, Chair, I've been asked to describe this second budget, the 600 million one, as the media spend budget. The acronym is quite long. I may be lost.
Let's confirm with Mr. Maseko whether that's the correct label.
That's media spend.
Media spend budget.
Okay, that's the 600 million.
That's
Yes.
the 600 million, Chairperson.
Okay.
So, Chair, I'll move between the media spend budget and 600 million budget. I get lost sometime. Mr. Maseko, I'm back at page 3 of your CV. And then I would like to get some more specifics from you about the last bullet point just before paragraph 2.6. You see there, you describe one of your line function in duty as the CEO of GIS as follows. As government spokesperson, attending cabinet meetings and announcing cabinet decisions through by weekly press conferences, speaking on behalf of government on policy issues, managing government media relations, speaking at national and international conferences. Do you see that?
I see that, yes, correct.
How does it happen that as the CEO of GCIS, you will assume the role of being a government spokesperson and also attend cabinet meetings and announce cabinet decisions?
Well, Chairperson, the way the system is designed is to make sure that there is proper alignment between what cabinet says and what government says on a regular basis. Government messaging to citizens is properly aligned. The job of CEO of GCIS was split into two. One is accounting officer for GCIS, that is day-to-day, managing day-to-day operations of GCIS. The second aspect was being government spokesperson. So as government spokesperson, I was sitting in cabinet meetings to communicate cabinet decision, yes, but also importantly, to make sure that if there are policy issues that arise in between cabinet meetings, we don't necessarily always have to wait for a cabinet meeting. We could address and deal with these issues and communicate on them without having to wait for a cabinet meeting. So it was a system designed to make sure that there's proper alignment between government communication or government messages across the board and cabinet decisions.
I have seen officials describing themselves as cabinet spokespersons. Is there a difference between a cabinet spokesperson and a government spokesperson?
Well, the first difference is that I think in my letter of appointment, it was government spokesperson, not cabinet spokesperson. Secondly, the difference between government spokesperson and cabinet spokesperson is that a government spokesperson can speak on matters beyond just cabinet decisions. So in other words, there could be an issue arising pertaining to government's reaction to, for example, we could say election results in Zimbabwe and there would not be a cabinet meeting and it is not possible to wait for a cabinet decision. So then a system is put in place to communicate with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister in the Presidency, and craft a statement, a government statement, without having to wait for a cabinet meeting. A cabinet spokesperson role, on the other hand, is purely a person who speaks on behalf of cabinet, and most of those posts internationally are held by people whose job is just to be spokesperson of cabinet. They just announce cabinet decisions but they have no responsibility for the overall government communication function. So mine was government spokesperson, not cabinet spokesperson.
Thank you. Mr. Maseko, just to conclude on that issue, when you stopped being the Chief Executive Officer of the GCIS, what happened to your role as government spokesperson?
Well, what happened to the role?
Yes. Did
I
you
think
continue with
the
that role or did it stop?
Well, I stopped performing that function because the two were linked during my time.
The two were linked.
Were linked, yeah.
Okay. That issue is going to become important at some point, Chair. We merely highlight it for now. I think those who have received the statement of Ms. Pumla Williams will understand the importance of the dual functions of the head of GCIS and being a government spokesperson.
Okay.
It's a matter that ought not to worry you. I now have an appreciation of what you did as the Chief Executive Officer of the GCIS. I'd like now to take you to your statement, the first affidavit. We now know that it begins at page 9. And I ask you to reflect on paragraph 2 of that statement. And you see that it is formulated in the indirect form of speech or speaking. You have explained to the chairperson the context of this affidavit.
That's correct.
Yes. I'm not going to ask you to repeat it. I just want you to confirm that whoever asked you, as you record indirectly in paragraph 2, was for the purposes that you indicated, and that was the purpose of investigation by the Hawks.
That's correct, Chairperson.
Yes. And in paragraph 3, you record that you first made a statement in response to the Secretary General. We have gone through that statement. I'm not going to take you back to it.
That's correct.
And then in paragraph 4, you foreshadowed the details of your experience with the Gupta family during your tenure as the accounting officer and chief executive officer of the GCIS.
That's correct.
Paragraph 5 is important, and there you say, I was approached by the Gupta family during your tenure as the accounting officer and chief executive officer of the GCIS and government spokesperson. You see that?
That's correct, yes.
Now, I'd like to get to the details of that approach. All I want to point out to you now is that from paragraph 6, page 9 of Exhibit E1 up to page 10, paragraph 9, you give a background that we have dealt with. So with your permission, I would like to gloss over those paragraphs. Are you comfortable with that?
I am comfortable, Chair.
Yes. And we now begin to talk about the approaches that you have foreshadowed in paragraph 5. They start at page 10, Chairperson, paragraph 10. And you say, around September-October 2010, I received a call from Mr. A.J. Gupta on my mobile number. You give the number. I'm not going to repeat it publicly. Requesting a meeting to discuss what he said was a new project which he and his company were launching, which he indicated required government support. You see that?
I see that, Chairperson.
I'd like to ask you some few specific questions, and I'll do so in bite-sized form, if you don't mind, and ask for your comment. At that point in time, I'm talking October 2010, did you know Mr. A.J. Gupta?
Yes, Chairperson, I did know him.
Are Are you comfortable to tell the chairperson how it came about that you knew him?
Yes, I am comfortable.
Please do.
Chairperson, one of my responsibilities as GCIS CEO was to be responsible for an agency called the International Marketing Council, which is currently known as Brand SA, Brand South Africa. And after my appointment as CEO of GCIS, I went through the list of board members and I realized that discovered that he was one of the board members. Not that I was necessarily looking for his name, I was just going through the list and his name was there. And I had several meetings, or attended several meetings of the board meeting. In one or two of those meetings during my tenure, he did attend, I think, one or two of those board meetings, and I met him there as one of the board members.
And I suppose at that meeting you may have exchanged some pleasantries or spoken to him?
Well, yes, Chairperson, I did have conversations with him and all other board members at the time.
Yes. And you, unlike other witnesses, you won't be confused about who Mr. A.J. Gupta is?
Not at all.
Then you say that he called you on a number, the
Yeah.
cell phone number. Do you know how he got the cell phone number?
Well, in my interactions with him, I don't recall ever giving him the number, but it would have been easy to get my number because as a board member of the International Marketing Council, my details were there. And in all the media statements that we issued as GCIS and I issued as cabinet spokesperson or government spokesperson, my number was always included there. So my number was fairly public.
And then you say that he indicated to you that he needed to discuss a new project which he and his company were launching. Did he disclose at that point in time the nature of the company, its name and details to you?
Well, the nature of the conversation was essentially about a request for a meeting to discuss a project, and the project was about setting up a media company in the country that will have interests in both print and electronic media.
I'll come back to a date when one of the media companies, more specifically TNA, was launched. It's a matter which is common knowledge because that date when TNA was set up has been disclosed by the Prairie Research Group in a report which has now been given to the chairperson by Ms. Norman. It has also been disclosed in the liquidation application brought by Mr. Mani to liquidate, amongst others, TNA. But as far as you are concerned, do you know when TNA was established?
If my memory serves me right, I think it was established in the latter part of 2010. It could be, I think it was latter part of 2010, but I don't recall, in fact, I don't know the exact date of their launch.
The date that I seem to recall, I thought I have it on hand here, but I don't, is somewhere 6 November 2010. Does that resonate with you?
I think it will be just about right around that time.
And then you say that he indicated that he wanted to discuss with you the government support which he and his company required.
That's correct.
Did he disclose to you at that point, the first call, what sort of support was he looking at?
He did not give me any specifics other than to say he needed government support for the project to succeed.
Did you ask him about it during that call, the first call?
First call, I asked him if he was able to give more information, and he said, no, the best way is to meet face to face and discuss the project.
Yes. And then I ask you to go to page 11.
Yes, sir.
And then I skip the first sentence of paragraph 11. You have already talked about it. And from the second sentence, you say the following. I was also aware at the time that there were talks of the Gupta family's plans to enter the media sector by establishing a newspaper and a television station. I, however, did not know any details in this regard at that time. You see that?
I saw that, Chair.
Fast forward. Do you know what newspaper and television station were established by the Gupta family?
I subsequently got to know that the newspaper they were launching was called New Africa, New Age, something like that.
New Age?
Okay, let me gather my thoughts. The New Age, I think.
Yes.
The New Age.
Yes.
The television station was ANN 7.
All right. In paragraph 12, you say that I was reluctant to accede to Mr. A.J. Gupta's meeting request because I did not have any details of the project that Mr. A.J. Gupta was referring to. Can I stop you there?
Yep.
And ask you to elaborate a bit for the chairperson. The basis of your reluctance beyond the fact that you did not have details about the project.
Chairperson, it is correct that I did not have details about the project. However, if Council, if you can go back to paragraph 11
Yes.
above, I do state that there were rumors already that the Gupta family was making moves to establish a newspaper and a TV station, firstly. Secondly, that the way the Gupta family was dealing with government officials was very untoward. In other words, they were using their connections, influence with senior politicians in government to extract as much contracts as possible from both government and state-owned entities. So these rumors were circulating. So when I heard that they were trying to get into the media space, I did have some reservations because I did anticipate that they could be thinking of doing the same with my function, and that's where the reluctance came about.
And then you say that despite your reluctance, you nevertheless decided to meet in order to get a better understanding of the project.
That is correct, yes.
And then you say in paragraph 13 that you ended your discussion with him on a specific note, and that is you would meet with him.
Yes, we at the end of the conversation agreed to meet. I must just say that the latter part of paragraph 12 is also important because my approach was to interact and meet with all the stakeholders in the media space, all media owners, editors, journalists, visit newsrooms. So it would have been difficult for me to simply refuse to meet them and yet meet owners of other media houses around the country. So I thought that in line with my overall approach to managing my portfolio, I should go and give them a hearing. But coming back to your question, at the end of that conversation, yes, we agreed to have a meeting so that I could actually hear what is it exactly that he wanted to discuss with me.
Was there an agreement between you and him as to where you will meet and when you will meet?
We agreed on a date, and he proposed, he said it would be easier to meet in Saxonwold, and that's where the meeting took place. We agreed to meet in Saxonwold.
In Saxonwold?
Saxonwold, Chairperson, that is the residence of the Gupta family.
Yes. When did you meet with him? As far as you can recall.
Chairperson, again, my apologies. We tried to, well, I tried to access my diaries from GCIS, but not as successful. So I unfortunately can't give a specific date. I do recall the time of the meeting, which was, I think it was 2 p.m. on that particular day. But I think it must be around
I suppose all I'm trying to establish
between, I'd say between, it might be around between May and July of 2010, somewhere there. But
I know questions of date is quite tricky given the time when these events happen, but all I'm trying to establish from you is after the call, more or less, how many days, weeks, or months did it take to get to that meeting?
my recollection would be that I think it must be within a week or two that such a meeting took place.
Within a week or two?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Malaga. Did you say, Mr. Maseko, it was around May, June, May, July?
May, June, July, somewhere around there.
Oh, that's 2010.
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, can it be? Because in paragraph 10, you say that you got a call in September, October 2010.
We will have to confirm that, Chairperson.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm pleased to hear that the acting DDG of GCIS is coming to testify before the Commission. And I'm hoping, Chairperson, that they could help to facilitate access to my diary, because
Yes.
all of those things are documented in my diary. And we were hoping that we would also be able to access transcripts of the cell phone conversations between myself and Mr. Gupta, so that we could put this matter to bed, because at the end of the day, all of these conversations must be existing somewhere in record.
Yes. Chair, I can say that we have set the investigators to look at this issue.
Okay.
But for now, can we proceed on the premise and tell me whether you're comfortable with it? That the meeting ultimately took place a week or so after the call.
Yeah, that much I can confirm.
Yes. Mr. Maseko, I'm going to skip paragraph 13 and paragraph 14 unless there is something of significance that you would like to bring to the attention of the chairperson with reference to those paragraphs.
Well, the paragraph 13 does refer to the choice of the venue.
Yes.
And there, Chairperson, I tried to communicate the basic message that at the time, the issue of Saxonwold compound of the Gupta family was not an issue of public interest. And I did not see anything untoward meeting them there. And in any case, I do meet with stakeholders in the media field, either at my offices or their offices or in restaurants. So the issue of venue was not of particular concern to me. And that's the message we're trying to communicate on paragraph 13. And 14 just refers to the fact that I went to the meeting with the sole purpose of just trying to understand what exactly is it that he was planning to do and what he expected from GCIS.
Yes. And then I ask you to consider paragraph 15. You say on the date of the meeting, as I was driving out of the office park lot, I assume that's the office park lot of the GCIS.
That's the, yeah, I think the building was called Midtown Building, but that's correct, yeah.
Where was it?
I'm sorry, Mr. Maseko, please don't forget the question you wanted to put. Mr. Maseko, I would ordinarily have thought that if somebody, say it's a business person or whatever, wanted to have a meeting with a government official because he or she wanted some business, I would have thought that ordinarily he would be the one who must come to the relevant government offices to discuss the matter. I can think of a situation where if it is somebody that maybe you know quite well, that you have had a lot of interactions with, and maybe there may be some other category. I could imagine that maybe you could then meet in their home. I'm just wondering whether it would have been normal to go and meet at the residence of somebody who wanted to do business, unless it is somebody, I don't know, maybe that you might have had a lot of interactions with.
Well, Chairperson, the conversation went on for some time with him, and at some stage I just decided to agree to the meeting. I will say that without any hesitation that I did not think too much into the venue, because I knew who I was, what type of person I was, and a person could meet me either at his house, office, my house, but knowing who I am, the venue would not change who I am.
Okay, thank you.
But the judge's question, the chairman's question still remains. Is it normal or practice in the public service for persons who require government support to meet outside the official premises of public service officials concerned? Is it normal business or employment practice?
Chairperson, it is normal for meetings between public servants and members of the private sector to take place outside of offices, official offices of either the company or government. Meeting in a private residence, you could argue that it is a little bit abnormal. But as I say, at that particular point in time, I didn't see anything untoward, because I thought it was a meeting where I needed to hear more, to get more about what he was talking about.
Yes. Chairperson, unless there's anything around paragraph 14, I would move to paragraph 15, and that is going to be a matter of controversy. I wonder whether this is not an appropriate time to adjourn.
Yes. It may be. How long do you think you might take tomorrow? I'm trying to see whether, subject to everybody concerned finding it acceptable, whether there is room to go on for about another 30 minutes or not. But it just depends whether it suits Mr. Maseko, it suits the legal team as well. I won't insist on it.
Yeah. Chair, it will take me a bit of time to go through the details of the statement. So to give an indication, I should be done by tea time or shortly after tea time, if we begin at the normal time.
Or,
But if Mr. Maseko is convenient, we can start at 9:30.
yeah, well, I was also thinking we could start at 9:30 if it suits everybody, including Mr. Maseko.
Yes.
Mr. Maseko, would 9:30 be fine for you tomorrow?
It would be perfect, Chairperson.
Yes.
And is that fine for the legal team?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
And Mr. Maseko, in the meantime.
I'm sorry, counsel for Mr. Maseko, is that fine?
That's most suitable, thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Chairman, then we would ask you to formally adjourn the proceedings.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll adjourn until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you, Mr. Maseko. You can come back tomorrow 9:30.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.